Hello, welcome to iBodyTV. I'm Isabel.
I'm Johnson.
And today we're talking about cycling.
We're going to be delving in a little bit to kind of tips and tricks. We're going to have a few people on the show today who are very experienced cyclists themselves. And I've got a little bit of a background in it, but Isabel, you used to be quite good.
Yeah, I used to do racing when I was younger, quite a lot younger. So now I'm older, I'm hoping to get back into it, so maybe they'll inspire me.
Well, let's get re-inspired today.
Andy, Madeline, thank you for coming. Madeline, can you just tell us a bit about what it's like to be a female cyclist?
Well, I think first off it's great, you know, it opens a whole world of opportunities. You can see loads on the bike, get out with friends, keep fit. There's still maybe a few barriers, both kind of for the professionals and for your sort of, you know, your amateur cyclist. I think on an amateur level, sometimes there's still a bit of animosity towards female cyclists amongst the kind of more traditional male clubs. You know, there seems to be this attitude that if the female's maybe, you know, doing really well and is maybe sort of matching the men, that some men seem to not be able to deal with that very well. And I guess on a professional level, there's still quite a few, you know, there's massive pay gaps. I don't really think, unless you're maybe Marianne Vos or Lizzie Deignan, that you can genuinely afford to be just a pure road cyclist. I know a lot that I've heard of have to work as well, you know, doing something else, which seems kind of crazy compared to the amount of men that kind of
Can be pro.
Yeah. So I suppose making it a viable career would probably help the whole image of female cycling. I mean, you know, not I'm a professional, but in terms of the wider spectrum.
Why do you think there are those gaps specifically in cycling clubs when you go out and the men don't really talk to the women?
I don't know. I think in some cases it's literally you're a young woman and they're an older man and they don't know what to say to you anyway. But I don't know quite what it is. I mean, maybe you've got an insight on it, Andy, as a man, but it seems to be, if as a female you're potentially threatening what they perceive as their kind of ability, you know, you're matching them on a hill or something. Some men just don't seem to quite know how to deal with it. So they either think you're racing them or that they can't be left behind, so they'll kill themselves to, you know, I've been on rides in the past where men have turned around and gone home under some other pretense that it's merely the fact that I seem to have beaten them up a hill and they can't deal with it. I had a man in his 40s suddenly decide he was going home, and another guy turned to me and was like, oh, it's because you matched him on the hill.
Did he pretend he had like a flat tire?
Yeah, he was just like, I've had enough of this, and just turns around and goes home, and you're like, right, okay then. It just seems crazy. I'm not there to just sort of, you know, I'm not there to kind of show men up, that's not my aim, but it just seems still sort of a weird, they can't deal with it if you're sort of threatening their masculinity, I suppose, which seems kind of odd, but...
So Andy, how would you feel if Madeline came up next to you and she was beating you on the hill?
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think road cyclists kind of have this sort of old boys club mentality for a long time, and it's changing. So in the time I've been racing, which is about 10 years or so, women's cycling has grown massively. So you'd turn up to a women's road race 10 years ago, and you'd see, you know, very few people, it splits a bit straight away. There's not really that kind of critical mass. All of a sudden, we go to now, you've got proper racing, the numbers are growing, so that, you know, it's actually quite a, you know, a big sport. And it's happened in such a short period of time that a lot of the more traditional cycling clubs don't really know how to deal with it. And it's kind of this, you know, this shift into a more modern sort of sport that's a bit more welcoming, a bit more kind of open to all kind of people.
So do you think successes like Laura Trott have maybe helped in the rise of women's cycling?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I think that the real catalysts have been things like the London Olympics that have just, you know, it's transformed cycling into a mass participation sport, whereas before it was a real minority that were doing it. And you know, they've really put funding into building that base, and it's beginning to show. You know, you go out on a weekend, you'll see so many people of all abilities, all ages out riding. And probably, well, we hope give it another 10 years and we might even see proper equality, but it's, you know, it takes time.
Road safety is obviously really important, but debatable. How important do you guys think it is to wear a helmet?
Yeah, it's probably wise too. So the only time I don't is in hill climbs, which, because helmets weigh a bit, and if you get an advantage you can.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, a 2-minute effort, usually very quiet roads, still risky, not, you know, I think there's kind of argument to change the rules there, but generally cycling on the road, there's not really a downside to helmets. You know, modern designs are very light, very well ventilated.
I mean, other countries have actually outlawed going out on your bike without a helmet, like Australia in particular, they're hot on it. Do you think, you know, in terms of the overall safety aspect, do you think it should be a law that, you know, every cyclist out on the road should protect themselves with a helmet?
Yeah, so what that's done in Australia is it's actually driven down the number of people cycling. So you've got to offset that. So yeah, definitely people, in my opinion, have the right not to wear a helmet. But it just seems sensible that you should. But at the same time, you don't want to start, you know, stopping people riding their bikes just because they don't want to wear a helmet.
Yeah, I mean, I broadly agree, but from what I've seen, the helmet won't save you from a high impact car crash. So I personally wear one when I'm out road cycling as kind of a sport, you know, training, but that's more to protect myself from my errors rather than a car's errors. So when I've crashed in the past through, you know, a slippy corner or gravel, that's when I think a helmet's going to protect my head. Whereas from what I've seen in terms of commuting and what the evidence actually shows is not wearing a helmet actually gives the illusion of you not necessarily being confident or know what you're doing, and therefore they've found through kind of testing that cars give you more space. So actually when I commute, I don't wear one for that very reason, because they found that when people wear high vis and helmets, cars are like, right, they're fine, pass really close, you know, don't give them any space. And if you look at the, you know, the head injury statistics, most head injuries actually happen in cars with drivers, not sort of cyclists on the road. But I do totally agree, it sort of seems, you're not going to, you know, if you put one on your head, it's not going to really disadvantage you in any way. So it's a nice thing to do. And obviously for children, I think it's really important and stuff like that. But I think it's got to be normalised. If you look at places like Holland, the Netherlands, they don't wear helmets. They just, you know, it's completely normalised. It's not, therefore it's not perceived as a dangerous activity.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. It's a really tough one. But I definitely would not suggest that it's, you know, you've got to wear one. I think that's not fair.
So I think the thing to emphasise is really it's not the most important thing in terms of your road safety. So things like road positioning, signing clearly where you want to go, using lights if it's dark, and actually nowadays even if it isn't dark there's a lot of daytime running lights available, and just kind of putting yourself on a road of I'm a road user, I'm justified being here. I think it's really easy, especially when you start out, to kind of be pushed towards the edge of the road, and it almost kind of encourages bad drivers to pass closely to you. If you're assertive and kind of, you know, I'm here, I'm part of this, you know, you generally find that actually a lot of road users will give you a bit more space. So it's, you know, it's riding well, it's educating drivers, it's a much bigger picture than stick a helmet on and all is good.
Yeah, so looking at road safety in other ways, not just to wear a helmet.
So, like you mentioned, you both love going out on the roads, and you can, you know, you have your long training days, I suppose, and it's really important to fuel your body. What type of stuff would you be kind of eating on your long rides?
I think for me, and I think it's super individual, and I'm not into sort of nutritional, you know, sort of in magazines or on the internet where it says, oh, you should eat this, this and this. I think you've got to experiment. Something that works for one person totally doesn't work for another. For me personally, it's probably fairly low sugar but quite high carb, so you don't want to eat endless sweet things. That just makes you feel a bit sick and ill, and you know, if you're not putting in really intense effort, so if I'm doing a much more endurance ride, you know, say like over 100 miles, I'm not ever going to maybe be going into the red, so you don't need super loads of sugar, but you do want carbohydrates. For me as well, I don't really deal well with large amounts of fat, but everyone's different.
You mentioned there about being out on a long ride, and you said going into the red. What does that kind of mean?
So, you know, when, I guess the way to define it would be you'd be unable to talk to someone, you'd be so out of breath, you know, you'd be at kind of what we call threshold, so where you're kind of, you wouldn't be able to sustain it for longer than a minute or so, you know. And obviously if you're going to be doing in excess of 100 miles, if you start doing that, you're not going to make it over 100 miles. So, and you know, when you go into the red, that's when you're really going to burn quick sugars, because that's all your body's got time for. Yeah. So that's when things like your gels and stuff like that would be really beneficial.
So a lot of maybe education that needs to go into like nutritional guidance.
Yeah, so I think context is one of the really important things. So you do get a lot of riders that, especially when you first start, you believe the marketing and the sports nutrition companies must only eat gels, I'm on a bike. And actually one of the things we really try and emphasise with our clients is having food that's appropriate to the riding you're doing. So on your club rides and things like that, you can meet your needs quite easily with actual real food. You don't need to be spending a fortune on sports nutrition, and actually a lot of sports nutrition is not very healthy. It's basically sugar. It has its place, so when your energy demands are really high, so if you're racing or, you know, doing a really hard workout, it can be useful. And it's, you know, that's what they're designed to do. We've just kind of got into a situation really, I think, where the sports nutrition industry have normalised these kind of performance foods into an everyday food. And actually things like malt loaf, bananas, sandwiches, you can eat these on the club ride. They work perfectly well, and actually they'll probably meet your energy needs. So it's kind of, it's feeding appropriate to the riding you're doing is kind of the key that I'd always emphasise.
Okay, thank you both for coming, that's been great, and thank you for watching.
And if you've enjoyed this video, please leave us a comment, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where there'll be plenty more videos like this coming shortly.